So all of the animals we get here at the sanctuary have been bred with the intention to be sold as pets or in some other captive use. So some of the animals are privately surrendered. The owners give them up to us after they realize they can't take care of them anymore. Occasionally they come from shelters or humane societies when they've been picked up or surrendered, running stray, or having been abandoned. We do not believe that wolves should be kept as pets or wolf dogs. They are a wonderful wild species. They have a very important job in the wild, but they are not suited for captivity. Dogs have had generations of breeding to make them fit within our lifestyles and human culture and social life. And wolves are very much wild, and therefore they should be allowed to live in the wild and not be kept as a pet.
We definitely, through our educational program, try to impress upon our audience that this is not a thing that needs to be carried through. We disadvantage these animals as soon as they're born because the breeders tend to take them away from their mothers when they haven't even opened up their eyes yet. So they don't even know how to communicate with their own kind. Then we drop them into our human world and expect them to behave as dogs, and they don't. So we set them up to fail. Over probably around 200,000 of these animals are euthanized each year.
It's a very shocking number to think that there are about 200,000 wolves and wolf dogs that are currently being kept as pets that will lose their life this year alone. And most of those animals, 90% of those animals, will be euthanized before they turn 2 years old. People just aren't prepared to be able to deal with a wild animal in their home. So they euthanize them because they can't keep a hold of the animal keeps getting out, or they have other behavioral problems of being destructive or difficult to manage and train. So when they look for options for this animal to go somewhere, I can't keep it anymore, I have to do something with it. There are very, very few places that can actually take them. Humane societies and shelters are almost always obligated to euthanize the animal if it comes to them because there are some liability risks that they just don't want to touch. It's kind of like a lot of the other dangerous breeds out there like pit bulls or German shepherds where you've got areas or biases toward these animals that make it just too much of a risk for an organization to try to adopt out, which means they either come to an organization like Wolf or they get put down. There's also a lot of abuse situations that happen with these animals where they pass away because of the abuse or neglect, simply because people are not prepared to be able to give the time or energy to the animal that it needs in order to be able to live in captivity successfully. Wolves are not suitable pets because they don't fit into our modern society the way we want them to. Dogs have had generations, tens of thousands of generations of selective breeding to make them what they are today, to give them the tools they need to be able to interpret humans, to be able to understand humans, to be able to work with humans. And dogs are almost instinctively able to recognize human cues and facial cues and directions. They are almost instinctively looking to people for guidance and direction, where wolves are very much independent. They have the wild genetics in them, and part of being wild is taking care of themselves, surviving on their own. So this wild instinct that gets them into trouble in captivity is the fact that they aren't going to sit there and wait for you to help them solve a problem. They're not going to wait for you to give them their food or let them outside or do anything like that, because they don't necessarily recognize that you will do those things for them. They're thinking in their own mind, I have to do this for myself, or I'm going to starve to death, or I'm not going to be able to get to water, or I'm not going to be able to find a mate, whatever it happens to be. So they're very independent thinking. They like to problem solve to get what they need in order to survive. And that makes them very, very challenging for people to keep in a captive situation, because it means you as a person have to put a lot of time and energy into that animal. You have to be willing to supervise that animal, to work with that animal. Oftentimes, if you interview someone who has successfully kept a wolf as a pet, you'll find out that they changed their entire lifestyle to fit the needs of the animal, rather than most dogs, which can fit into your current lifestyle. You can't have a 9-to-5 where you leave the wolf alone at home all the time. They're going to get bored, they're going to get destructive, they're going to get anxious, all these different things that can happen that would cause it to be very problematic. And so most people who do successfully keep wolves or a wolf dog as a pet are ones who oftentimes have lots of land. They work from home. They're able to be with that animal 24/7. They don't go on vacation. They never leave their animals supervised by anybody but themselves. They take a lot of time and energy to make sure that animal is properly cared for. Most people in the United States, most people in the world, can hardly take care of a goldfish. And they're pretty low maintenance. So it makes it very difficult. And that's why euthanasia happens a lot, because these people get in way over their heads with an animal that they're totally unprepared for. They make this assumption that because dogs evolved from wolves, wolves must be dogs, and it doesn't work that way. And they end up way over their heads. They end up having a lot of trouble there. And when they try to find solutions for those problems, if they're not willing to put in the money or the energy to change their lives, their only option is really to find a sanctuary. As I said before, shelters and humane societies can't adopt these animals out. There are too many myths and legends and fears and misconceptions about wolves as a species and wolf dogs as a species to make most of those organizations want to willingly take the risk of placing that animal in a home.
And I'd like to add to that too, is that these breeders who breed these animals are there to make money. And the animals can sell for as low as $800 and up to $8,000 a piece. And generally when they hand them off to the owner, they don't tell them what they need to do for their care. And so, they run off with this cute little puppy, and they grow into adults, and they're like, I don't know how to care for this animal now. So what we find for the people who want to own wolves or wolf dogs, have been more in captivity, they tend to want to have that power of feeling like I own part of the wild. And we find that for men, it tends to be kind of a macho thing. I look at me, I'm controlling this wild animal. And also when they see him as puppies, at that point, it's just so cuddly and cute looking that, they can fall in love with that puppy look, not knowing exactly what they need to do when they become adults. So, a lot of people are misguided, and again, with them being wolf dogs, thinking, were they bred with a dog, so of course it's going to be more dog-like, and I'm going to be able to own part of the wild, plus they're going to behave like a dog. So, a lot of these people go in with the wrong ideas that they're going to be able to control this animal, say, look, hey, I'm walking my wolf dog with me down the street, and aren't I cool? And then they don't have, a lot of these people they don't have the right home for them. They don't have the money to care for them properly, and they don't even think about the issue when it comes to veterinary care, because that's another thing, another issue that needs to be taken in consideration. So, and then the breeders are people just wanting to make money. So, we run into people who go in with this idea, look at me. And I'm going to throw in another topic here, just for the issue about wild cats. There are more in captivity than there are in the wild. And, like 10 to 30,000 large cats in captivity because people want to make them pets. So these people are drawn for the wrong reason.
You also get, when you're talking about people kind of attitudes, she talked about kind of the macho attitude, the tough attitude. You also get the lover attitude, where they have the opinion that wolves are the greatest thing in the whole wide world. And everyone should love them, and isn't it I just have this spiritual deep connection. I can commune with them, they're my spirit animal. You do get some people who end up seeking out wolves because of that, because I'm part Native American, or I have the spiritual connection, or the wolves talk to me and I've always felt drawn to them. You can get that attitude as well for people looking for wolves. And then, to be fair, there are a number of people who kind of end up in the middle, who are as Shelley said, taken in with the puppy. They are at a dog park or see an ad in the paper and they go, oh, this is so cute. I didn't know you could have one. You want one? Okay, honey, let's go. Let's go get a wolf, because that sounds like a great idea. And, they don't really think about it. They don't really have an opinion of it. Or they sit there and they have a friend who has a wolf or wolf dog and they go, that animal was so pretty. It was so well behaved. That would be, I want one. I mean, I loved that animal. I got to know him and I got to be with him. And so they kind of have that ignorance factor in there where they're just like, this is cute. This is fun. Let's try it. And then there are the people who end up with them by accident. We get a number of calls where they're going, I adopted a husky from a shelter and I don't think it's a husky. It's certainly not behaving like it, especially now that I'm getting to know the animal. But yeah, you tend to have the extremes are the most common that seek out breeders to purchase wolf dogs are the ones that are either kind of that macho attitude that Shelley was talking about, or kind of the wolf lover attitude where, they're the best thing that's since sliced bread. So everyone should have one because they're awesome. Becoming domesticated is an action that takes controlled breeding of the individuals by people. So sanctuaries like us, no, there is no chance that these animals would become more domesticated because we do not breed. So each animal we get is an individual. So what you could say is, while the animals that we have at our sanctuary could be tame, could be more tame, or could become more tamed, you can never truly create them as a domestic animal. With breeders, you in theory could, through selective breeding, by controlling and selecting for specific traits, whether that's a particular physical appearance or behavioral characteristic that you want, you could go toward a more domestic animal. However, the process of domestication pretty much negates wild. And there are a lot of factors when you start domesticating an animal that you will unintentionally change about the animal as well. So a domestic wolf, I don't think we could get a domestic wolf. Any kind of domestication process with the wolf would eventually lead to what we have today as dogs. You could get friendlier wolves, you could get more antisocial wolves, you could get spotted wolves, you could do anything like that through selective breeding and that process of domestication. It would take hundreds of generations to really produce a truly domestic individual, I think, but it is possible with breeders. However, sanctuaries, since most sanctuaries are not involved in any kind of breeding program with their animals, there's not that risk of domestication, really. You could possibly maybe see some domestication with some of the captive breeding programs where they are selecting for genetic diversity, but in those situations, those animals are almost never given the opportunity to become familiar with people, to become comfortable with people. So it's really, that is unlikely as well in those types of captive breeding for release programs. You wouldn't, even though we are controlling their genetics a little bit, we're actually controlling to increase diversity in those animals rather than limit diversity, which is usually what you find with domestication. You're selecting for a specific trait or two specific traits that you want all of your representatives of that species to have, whether it's curly hair, floppy ears, spotted coats, whatever it happens to be. You want all of them to have that, so you're actually trying to reduce and limit genetic diversity through the process of domestication.
Part of what we do, just kind of give you a background about Wolf, we have three main focuses on our mission. And it's sanctuary, which is what we do when we care for these guys for life, and education, which Michelle goes out to the public and talks about the importance of wolves in the wild and why we shouldn't have them as pets. And then the other part is rescue. And we have a rescue coordinator that coordinates with sanctuaries and rescues all over the United States, and we're working together through that network. And so when we're looking for a potential companion, we reach out to that network with certain characteristics that we're looking for, the sex, the age, their personality, and so we'll look for that particular match. And we've done pretty good so far, knock on wood. And the other thing too that we try to look for when we bring someone here, we have more of a natural setting. So we're looking for ones that are not going to fit well in maybe a more domestic setting for people who can care for them. So we want ones that are also in a very challenging situation where they might be close to being euthanized, or they're coming from a really bad situation. So that's where we work on trying to bring them into our sanctuary here.
There is definitely a misconception about the degree of danger these animals represent. People hear the word wolf and they think Little Red Riding Hood, Three Little Pigs, werewolves, you know, all these really dangerous, they're decimating our environment, they're eating all of our game for hunting, they're going after our livestock. There's definitely a lot of myth and legend involved with the whole perception of wolves. You know, there are certain animals out there in the world that are designated the bad guys. Sharks, snakes, spiders, wolves. And it's easier just to continue to blame that animal for your problems, blame that species for the issues that crop up around it, than to actually figure out what they're truly like. A lot of people just, you know, I've been told since I was little that wolves will eat all livestock and rip fetuses out of cow bellies, and they'll just do it, and I know it's true, even if they've never seen it and there's no evidence that happens. It's easier to believe what you've been told than to go and doubt what you've been told. And that's true of anything. So wolves are one of those bad guy species. They're ones that get a bad rap. So there is a lot of, I believe, irrational fears toward the true reality of what a wolf is. Now, a wolf or a wolf dog, in my experience, is no more or less dangerous than any other dog you could get. Really, any other animal you can get. You just have to understand. You don't treat a horse the same way you treat a cat, the same way you treat a turtle. You know, you have to know what you're dealing with. You have to know what their triggers are, what their behaviors are, and how to interact and deal with that. But in my experience, they are no more or less dangerous than any dog. And in general, what I have experienced is wolves and wolf dogs are less likely to engage in violence than dogs are, because they're still thinking about their own individual safety over the safety of their human, where we've trained that out of dogs. We want dogs to be a guard dog, and it doesn't do us any good if something scary is coming at us and the dog looks at it and goes, you know what, I don't want to take that on. I don't want to do that. So I'm going to run and I'm going to leave you to handle it. Good luck. We don't want that in a dog. That's very much where the wolf is. The wolf is like, if you're not stupid enough to run away with me, you're on your own. So they're very much concerned about their own personal safety. So again, in my experience, I find they're less likely to engage in active aggressive behaviors than dogs are, but I cannot say they are more or less dangerous than a dog. There are a lot of people out there who like wolves and are pro-wolf and very, very active and involved in the wolf issue. And among those who are in kind of the pro-wolf camp, there are definitely different viewpoints about the issue of keeping wolves in captivity. There are people like ourselves at the sanctuary who feel like it's certainly as a pet or any kind of pet industry related situation that they should not be kept as pets because they're really not suitable for that, and 90% of the people who get them as pets fail as pet owners. So we don't feel that. But there are definitely people who are very pro-wolf, who feel very strongly about wolves, both as a wild species and as a captive species, that are very much for the idea of keeping these animals as pets, of keeping them in the community, having people exposed to them all the time, whether under the impression of being species ambassadors, an ambassador for the species to generate more support for wolves, or just because they have this belief that wolves are a very special, unique, wonderful animal, and I want that physical one-on-one connection with them. So there is definitely that divide among the pro-wolf community on whether or not these animals should be, or if it's even ethical to breed them and keep them in captivity, especially along the lines of a pet ownership setting. Most of the people that we encounter are actually very positive toward the sanctuary and our beliefs and our methodologies. There are definitely some people, they aren't opposed to the sanctuary per se, but they definitely do not necessarily agree with our belief on pet ownership. So they're happy that we're out there helping, but they disagree on the fact that we feel these animals should be left in the wild. On the topic of bringing wolves into Colorado and them being a disease vector, which could influence the environment as a whole, I'm not a veterinarian, so I don't know any specifics, but I have not heard of anything being a greater risk in areas where wolves have been reintroduced. I mean, obviously there are illnesses that can be transmitted to and from wolves from other species, but I don't have any specific examples of that increasing or decreasing in an area. The one example that I can think of that wolves would actually be a benefit for helping to control disease is with chronic wasting disease in deer and elk and other ungulates, because to my knowledge, the disease itself, there has never been a canine, dog, coyote, wolf that has been susceptible to that particular disease. So eating those diseased animals, taking those diseased animals out of the population would actually help to increase the fitness of the wild prey populations here in Colorado and in a lot of states where we're having problems with chronic wasting disease or overpopulation of deer, and without really risking too much of that disease transmission into another species.
And if you guys go up to Rocky Mountain National Park, they have these huge fences to try to do what wolves do naturally, which is to try to protect riparian areas and stuff like that, and we fail. And wolves go and what they do is they help to cull colonies of the weak and the ill, whereas when hunters go out, when they're trying to step in as nature, they're going to be taking out the really good, healthy, prime-looking animals. So we need to allow nature to be what it's supposed to do, and that's to establish balance. And we need wolves to be there to help establish that balance, have healthy populations of elk, deer, ungulates, and then, as we saw with Yellowstone, other things start to come back and reestablish with the riparian areas, the beavers and other things, where we start to now have more diversity in the animals and in the plants when you have overpopulation of the ungulates there. So we have to get involved. So there's a lot of controversy about wolves in Colorado. The western border of Colorado is ideal for wolves to be able to thrive and survive. However, there's so many barriers for it to be able to actually happen without us doing a reintroduction program. And that's where a lot of the controversy comes, and there has been a lot of debate within the Colorado Parks and Wildlife and the Commission and pro-wolf groups. And unfortunately, our governor, Hickenlooper, and the governors of Utah, New Mexico, and Arizona all signed a proclamation that they will not allow a reintroduction program. So we're kind of fighting against things. We know that for a singular animal to come into Colorado, find a mate, and actually be successful on being able to have packs be able to be thriving, it's not going to happen anytime in our near future. It's going to have to come through us actually taking an active role in it. And it's going to be through education on trying to help to dispel some of these myths about wolves, and to try to work with people who are against the reintroduction of wolves in Colorado or in the Rockies, anywhere in the West, is to be able to try to work with them to hear their side and try to work with them to come up with solutions.